Welcome to James Street North. As usual, this video is designed as an aid to exploration. Log off the computer, pull up this video on your phone, and go for a walk. Each time I'm done talking about a video, I'll throw up a map to get you to the next one. Pause the video, and take a stroll. Indeed, feel free to wander off script for a while. I'll still be there when you get to the next site, and there's always another side street to explore. James Street North was destined for prominence starting in 1853, when the Great Western Railway, Hamilton's first, passed through Hamilton several blocks north of the then town site. James Street, the principal artery connecting the town to the new railway station, became the principal gateway to the city. Over the subsequent decade, hotels sprung up in the area immediately surrounding the railway station, while a commercial strip developed along the length of the street. The city's first streetcar line was established in 1873, linking the downtown core with the Great Western Railway Station. Early on, James Street North was an area inhabited by many of the city's wealthiest citizens, but the proximity of the railway attracted industry, and over the 1860s and 70s, impoverished English, Scottish, and Irish immigrants poured into the area seeking employment. They established churches and community institutions. Indeed, at one point the city's Catholic Cathedral and Orange Hall were located mere blocks from one another in the area. At the time, the neighbourhood was a vibrant district, with churches, industries, shops, and houses clustering cheek by jowl. Starting in the 1870s and accelerating in the late 19th century, the British immigrants in the area were joined by Italian immigrants, especially from Sicily, and still later, the area came to be home to a large portion of the city's Portuguese community. While the end of the Second World War saw a burst of prosperity in the James Street area, by the 1970s and 80s, the neighbourhood was suffering from suburban flight and the destructive effects of the private automobile. The last streetcar ran down James Street in 1951, and shoppers began to abandon the district in favour of newly established malls on the city's outskirts. The area, however, bounced back, and by the early 21st century was home to much of the city's arts community, playing home to art crawls and music venues. Today's walk begins at the intersection of James and Cannon Streets. The northeast corner of James and Cannon was once home to Knox Presbyterian Church. In the mid-19th century, the Presbyterian Church in Canada was divided on the question of whether Canadian Presbyterians should maintain formal ties with the Presbyterian Church in Scotland, an institution which itself was formally associated with the Scottish government. A middle way appeared in 1843, when a group of Scottish Presbyterians established the Free Church, severing official ties with the British government. Jumping at the chance to maintain religious, but not political, ties to the homeland, a group of Hamilton's Presbyterians formed an affiliated congregation, erecting a large classical structure on this site in 1846. By 1875, Canada's Presbyterians had united into a single church, but the legacy of separate churches remained, and Knox Presbyterian remained a substantial congregation until the building was destroyed in a disastrous fire in 1940. Several doors south on James Street is the site of the Grand Opera House, also since destroyed. Built in 1880 to plans by Toronto architect George Lalor, the building was a spectacular Second Empire structure, capable of seating well over 1,000 patrons and hosting shows by Sarah Bernhardt and Oscar Wilde. The structure was demolished in 1961 to be replaced by a parking lot. Walk 2 blocks east on Cannon Street to John Street, then turn right and walk half a block south on John Street. You're looking for the Red Brick Church and 112 John Street North. The Stewart Memorial Church was established in 1835 as St. Paul's African Methodist Episcopal Church. The congregation served as a religious home for fugitive slaves from the United States and was intimately associated with the Underground Railway. The church was built in 1848, but originally featured a wooden facade, the present Gothic brick exterior dating to renovations of the building in 1905. If you're interested in industrial history, you might consider detouring a block east to see the Cannon Knitting Mills, a large textile factory on the southeast corner of Cannon and Mary. The oldest portions of the building were built in 1854 to serve as a foundry, and the complex was expanded several times, with the most recent portion dating to a 1902 expansion of the building to house Chipman Holton Knitting. Of particular note are the offices on the south end of the building. When you're done, return west along Cannon Street to James, turn right, and walk half a block north on James Street to 175 James Street North. The ornate red building at 175 James Street is Hamilton's Orange Hall. The hall was built to house the Hamilton Orange Society, a fraternal brotherhood for Irish Protestants, which rose to prominence in Ontario politics at the turn of the century, but faded in importance as Orangemen came to be accused of racism and bigotry towards Irish Catholics. The hall was designed by Hamilton architects Stewart and Whitten in 1905, and featured 2 large halls on the upper floors. The medallion above the 3rd floor windows features a sculpture of William of Orange, the King of Britain responsible for the pacification of Ireland. The imposing complex across the street from the Orange Hall is the city's armories, really two large structures connected by a narrow segment along the street front. The northern Romanesque structure was erected in 1887 as the 13th Battalion's drill hall. Designed by Henry James of the Department of Public Works, the building proved inadequate almost from the beginning, and in 1907 the Hamilton firm of Stewart and Whitten was hired to dramatically expand the armories to the south, erecting the imposing baronial southern hall. Continue north a block on James Street. You're looking for the large church set back from the street, mid-block between Robert and Barton Streets. Christ Church, founded in 1827, is Hamilton's oldest Anglican congregation. In 1835, Nathaniel Howson, a prominent local merchant, donated the present site to the congregation, and a frame church was erected. In 1852, William Thomas, a prominent Toronto architect, was hired to rebuild the church and produced an impressive set of Gothic plans. The congregation balked at the cost, however, and ended up constructing only the choir and nave of the church Thomas had designed for them. Notably, the tower and front half of the 1835 church remained in place. In 1875, the church was designated the cathedral for the Diocese of Niagara. In line with the church's new status, the classical wooden tower was dismantled, and the church was given an impressive Gothic facade, built to plans by the leading Toronto architects Langley, and Burke. The church is among Hamilton's most attractive, both inside and out, and if open, I strongly recommend stepping inside. Across the street from Christ Church Cathedral, on the southwest corner of James and Colborne, is the Freeman Building, one of dozens of Victorian industrial buildings which once dotted the James Street North area. The building dates to 1873, although the impressive towers the building once sported were added as part of an 1888 expansion. The building's roofline was lost in a fire in 1903, with the three principal floors surviving as shops and apartments to the present day. Continue north 2 blocks on James Street. If you're interested, detour a few addresses west on Barton Street to see the excellent Romanesque All Souls Roman Catholic, built in 1922, to serve a predominantly Southern European congregation. Otherwise, or when you're finished, step into the park on the northeast corner of James and Murray Streets. The ornate classical building, dominating the north side of the park, was built in 1930 by the Canadian National Railway as Hamilton's new station. The new railway station, designed by staff architect John Schofield, was dramatically larger and more up-to-date than the old station, a block and a half to the west had been, and its design echoed that of larger terminals in Toronto, Winnipeg, and Chicago. Of particular note are the stone carvings above the main entrance. The structure served as Hamilton's principal railway station for 2 generations, but eventually suffered from declining traffic. The last train departed from the building in 1993, following which the structure sat empty for nearly 2 decades. In the year 2000, the station was renovated by the Labourers International Union of North America to serve as a conference and event hall. Rail service was recently restored to the area when GO Transit, Toronto's commuter rail network, erected a new station on the west side of James Street in 2016. Cut through the GO Transit station to McNabb Street, and then carry on half a block along Stewart Street. You're looking for the ornate stone structure at 51 Stewart Street. Among Hamilton's few surviving pre-Confederation public buildings, Hamilton's Customs House was erected in 1860. The structure was made necessary by the extensive trade with the United States moving over the 7-year-old Great Western Railway, whose yards the Customs House overlooked. An imposing stone Italianate building, the structure served in its original role until 1888, when it was renovated to serve first as an elementary school, and later, among other things, as an apartment building, an immigration center, a YWCA branch, and a factory. Today the building is home to the Ontario Workers' Arts and Heritage Centre. Across the street from the Customs House are the tracks of the Great Western Railway, Hamilton's first. Late in 1853, the Great Western connected Niagara Falls to Windsor, and a Hamilton to Toronto branch was added to the network in 1855. The Great Western's first station was located a block west of the Customs House, replaced in 1875 by a large brick station likely designed by Joseph Hobson, the Great Western's chief engineer. The structure stood until 1930, when it was replaced by John Schofield's classical station on James Street. Return east to McNabb Street, and turn right, walking 2 blocks south to Barton Street. Along the way, notice the ornate Victorian townhouses from 252 to 262 McNabb Street, built in 1879. Turn right on Barton Street, and walk half a block, stopping in front of the stone townhouse at 55 Barton Street West. The Roach House is a surviving element of the area's early past as an upscale suburb prior to the development of extensive industry. The elegant stone house was built in 1845 for George Roach, an early mayor of the city, and when it was built, the house stood on a large property with several outbuildings and a clear view of the lake. The property on which it once stood has since been subdivided into building plots. continue half a block west on Barton Street to Park Street, and turn left, walking 2 blocks south on Park to Sheathe Street. St. Mary's Church, on the southeast corner of Park and Sheathe, is Hamilton's oldest Roman Catholic congregation, dating to 1827, although the present site wasn't acquired until 1838. With the growth of the Niagara region, the establishment of a separate diocese of Hamilton was inevitable, and when the diocese was established in 1856, the cathedral was established in the by then inadequate St. Mary's. The destruction of the old church in a fire 3 years later was viewed as an opportunity to rebuild on a much larger scale, and the present St. Mary's Cathedral was dedicated in 1860. The building has been expanded and renovated many times since then. Of particular note is the 1882 reconstruction of the interior by Joseph Connolly, one of Ontario's leading ecclesiastical architects of the period. The interior remains intact, and is well worth stepping into if you find the church open. St. Mary's was, at its peak, surrounded by a substantial complex of Catholic institutions stretching over several blocks. Of particular note was the Victorian St. Mary's School, destroyed in a fire in 1965, and St. Cyril and Methodius Roman Catholic Church on the northeast corner of Park and Sheathe, which was built in the 1920s to house Hamilton's Slovakian Catholics. The building lost its status as cathedral with the relocation of the bishop's chair to St. Patrick's in 1921, but remains a landmark in the James Street North area. From here you can return to the beginning of the walk by walking 2 blocks south on Park Street to Cannon, turning left, and walking 2 blocks east on Cannon Street to James. Alternately, you could spend the afternoon exploring the excellent residential streets, both east and west of St. Mary's.